Hello, welcome to my channel, Christopher Taylor, Sovereign Harmony. Welcome back. Today is April 30th, 2019. And it's the, I think, third video I've done in 2019. So if you want to go back, I'm going to talk a little bit about this year, kind of what's going on right now. Nothing specific really at this point. Usually I'd come on about retrogrades and eclipses and whatnot. So in this case, we're kind of in between those things, and they'll happen again. I'll be back again for those. But what I want to do is kind of do a year in review so far. We're about, believe it or not, 1/3 of the way through 2019. So we're 4 months through. And if you watched my first two videos in January and February of 2019, I talk a lot about this year being the year of zealotry and disclosure, okay? And that's because of this Jupiter-Neptune square. Jupiter in Sagittarius, that's all this information, belief systems coming out, and it's contradictory, you have one against another, etc. With that square to Neptune in Pisces, that adds confusion. It makes it difficult to be clear about what is true, okay? So we can be highly zealous about our truth and equally as zealous about denying or rejecting what someone else sees as true. And so in the political frame, it obviously comes out really strongly, and you can see that going pretty wild and strong this year so far. There's also what I want to talk about is Saturn right now is actually, I think it went retrograde this morning, believe it or not. If not, it was late last night. And so Saturn goes retrograde every year, so I don't usually talk about it. But in this case, it is conjunct the moon's south node in Capricorn. So the nodes of the moon, they're invisible points. They just have to do with the intersection between the sun and the moon from our perspective on Earth. And so when they're aligned with the sun and the moon crossing each other in the full moon and new moon, that's when we get eclipses, okay? So it's just letting us know where that intersection point is. And the south node, which from an esoteric level, we interpret that as the energy we're coming from, the north node, the energy we're heading toward. And so as a transect across the zodiac, in this case right now, we have the south node in Capricorn with the north node in the exact opposite of Cancer. And Saturn happens to be right there on that south node in Capricorn where it's going retrograde. So that gives it, this Saturn retrograde, some more oomph to it, some more significance, okay? And we just saw Pluto, which has been in Capricorn since 2008, and I've talked a lot about this in previous videos, which I won't get too into it here. But that south node of the moon crossed over Pluto just about a month ago in March, say late March or so. And so this area where Saturn is approaching Pluto, they're getting close to being conjunct, which will be something that will be with us here early 2020. So just months away now as we speak. So, but I want to focus on the Saturn part of it since that's what's happening right now. But generally speaking, this Saturn, Pluto, and Capricorn all has to do with kind of the old guard, so it's the rules and structures that govern us in our personal lives, but also collectively. And with the south node screening through that area, this is something we're releasing, okay? So we're really seeing this stuff come up, these old rules we've held ourselves by, and on a collective level, this old system, the old systems that aren't as functional anymore for the reality that we live in today. And so they're kind of up for review. They're up for awareness so we can take action in really away from them, essentially, okay? And so this is gonna linger. This Saturn South Node interaction is gonna linger through the fall. So it is not something just this week or this month or anything like that, which is why I wanted to bring it up, because it is an ongoing theme for the year, and it's piggybacking on the themes of the year that I just discussed previously as a review of my previous videos, which is that Jupiter squaring Neptune, which is really the major theme of this year, that zealotry and disclosure. And so when we take on new information, when we find out new truth, that inevitably means that the foundation, the structures that we rely upon get shooken up, essentially. Because if we build structures based on certain beliefs, which is what we do, we have assumptions and beliefs, and then we make decisions based on those. And so if we have these existing structures that are based on assumptions and beliefs that are being brought into our awareness that may or may not, even there's Neptune in Pisces, may or may not be true, it shakes those structures a little bit. and it makes us question them, and that's exactly where we're at with Saturn and also, again, Pluto on the South Node in Capricorn as well. And so it's something that it's the time for it here in 2019, and of course in the U.S. it's right before an election year, 2020, and it's going to be an interesting one with Saturn reaching Pluto and Jupiter coming from Sagittarius, where it is right now, squaring Neptune, and it'll be in Capricorn too, joining that whole bunch and amplifying things further. In fact, Jupiter and the South Node will be joining each other in early Capricorn in early January of 2020. So right as Saturn and Pluto are joining each other in January of 2020, we'll have Jupiter on the South Node in Capricorn in 2020, similar to what Saturn is now. So it suggests that what's happening here over the next several months is an ongoing process that probably in January is when we're going to really see some tangibility of what is just floating around, you know, hearsay and information-wise, but actually getting things on the ground and formulating and changing things, etc. And what that looks like, I have no idea. I'm not going to predict anything either way or take a side politically in either way. I'm just going to say that this is, you know, what people think is true and are convinced is true may not be true. And we have perfect examples of this kind of thing happening right now. And we can look at, you know, look at just a couple things. So one being this Mueller report, right? In the U.S., the Mueller was investigating Trump and supposed collusion with Russia, et cetera, et cetera. So for 2 years, the media, especially CNN, you know, really were convinced, or at least wanted the public to be convinced, because it was certainly pushed down people's throats, that it was true. Like, let's just wait for the information to come out. It's going to be true, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so you have this sort of zealot belief system that this is true, take him down. Then the report comes out recently, and what's the findings? And the findings aren't exactly cut and dry, but on one level, it basically says no collusion, but then on another level, it's certainly, like, it doesn't, you know, rule out certain things that were investigated, et cetera, et cetera. So it sort of makes people that think, oh, this is definitely true, go say, wait a minute, what? It isn't definitely true? Then what have we been hearing for 2 years? Okay, but at the same time, with Neptune and Pisces, etc., there's still some fogginess to the report, etc., in what's being released, what's not being released. So, you know, both sides are kind of left hanging in this sense. But as far as the media was concerned, it was definitely true. This was going to happen, and it didn't happen the way it was purported to. And this is a perfect example of the Jupiter and Sagittarius zealotry, the Neptune and Pisces kind of undefined energy, in the fogginess, in the lack of clarity, and, you know, joining together in a square. That's not an easy energy to put together. So we have confusion, we have information that's confusing, and zealotry on both sides, and dissatisfaction all around. I think Pisces really does, especially Neptune and Pisces, represents dissatisfaction. There's always more, right? And Sagittarius too, but Jupiter and Sagittarius also has a sort of a hungriness, hunger for more and more. Okay, so there's an expansiveness to both of those energies, and so we see that playing out there. And what happened right around that same time, which is interesting, is if you're familiar with Julian Assange, so he's, you know, one of the founders or runners of WikiLeaks, or whatever his title is, I don't know. But he's someone that finds information, and, you know, whether or not he's legit, you know, is this really an authentic person finding information, or is it kind of part of more of a higher level, you know, coup on the public? Who knows? But the point is, this is someone involved in information. So here we are, Jupiter square Neptune again. And what happens? He gets arrested in Ecuador days or so after the Mueller report's released. And that happened right before a whole bunch of money from the International Monetary Fund went toward Ecuador. So no coincidence there or anything. I mean, we can read into that. And that kind of goes back to the whole Capricorn energy, this Pluto in Capricorn, this Saturn in Capricorn, the old guard. This is that global money system, okay? The old money system that's still basically calling the shots. They give some money to Ecuador. Ecuador releases Assange to the U.S. so he can get prosecuted, or I'm not sure if he's going to the U.S. or Britain or wherever he's going, but he's getting released to be prosecuted. And why now, right? And it's just interesting because if you know the history over the last 2 years of the Mueller investigation, it was Assange who was threatening to release emails from Hillary Clinton to the other side of it, the side that was trying to get Trump impeached, in trouble in some way or whatever. Here was Assange saying, oh, wait till you see what I have on this side, and it's not that he was playing party favorites or anything, it was just that there was more information to be had. And so you have, with Trump not being exonerated, but sort of coming out not as definitely in collusion with Russia through the Mueller report and the finality of it, the next threat to the elites would be Assange and information he might have, right? Because if it wasn't Russia colluding in the DNC, maybe it was an insider, and maybe there's information about that. I'm speculating, I have no idea. But my point is, someone in the elites used that old guard, the International Monetary Fund, to get Assange out of Ecuador and into custody to prevent any kinds of releases of information now that the Mueller reports are complete. And so that also just has to do with this theme of information and disclosure, okay? As well as the zealotry that goes with two political parties and two different sides of what is essentially moral and right for people and justice, etc. And another case that was in the news just recently that falls along with this theme in 2019 is the Jussie Smollett situation. At first, it was back in February when he was allegedly, mugged and it was a hate crime, etc. This set off the zealotry of, and racism and whatnot. Then we find out that it was actually a staged event, and he brought it upon himself basically to get attention and who knows for whatever reasons. And so now, the Chicago police are pretty upset that their resources were spent essentially investigating a path that wasn't going to lead anywhere because it was fake. So there's a perfect example of Neptune and Pisces, unclear information in that Jupiter and Sagittarius. The reasoning for it was to incite the perception of a racial and, I guess, a sexual orientation hate crime. It was kind of a double hate crime in that case, or supposed to be anyway. And so you can see that Jupiter and Sag, just that sort of righteousness, like, I can do this because this exists and I'm just showing that it exists. But the reality is it wasn't real. So, and then we have, I think it was whoever, they were going to move through with the charges and then they got dropped out of nowhere. And that's confusing as well, because if we have all this evidence and all these charges, why is it dropped? Again, Jupiter and Sagittarius squaring Neptune and Pisces. It's hard to understand what's true, and it's hard to understand, where to kind of place our feet down. And that going back now to Saturn and Capricorn, and Pluto and Capricorn, and this South Node coming across there, the old guard, and how it's coming up for review. Okay, so I think what's happening is that the general public is starting to become aware of sort of this top-down old guard tier of how things operate in the world, how information is controlled, how our perception of what information is portrayed, and basically shown. We're told how to think and how to feel about it, and and what we should think about other people who think differently. And that's kind of the job of the media. And the media is, ultimately, if you look through it and you do your own research, it's ultimately owned by a few entities that are having their strings pulled by the same entities that are political pundits, and then you go behind them and see who's pulling their strings, etc. And it's kind of one string of one continuum essentially. And this is, in my opinion, what's happening energetically right now is, with all this confusion, with all this sense of, wait, I've always been told this was true and now it isn't. People are seeing things, whether it's just one situation or it's just an accumulation of situations that are awakening us to this idea that we're being lied to in a lot of ways. And there's certain agendas and certain practices that are putting the perceptions that they want in our minds into our minds. And when we start realizing we're being played, essentially, a lot of us don't like that. And so there's a sense of wanting to step away from the old guard, to release the old, and to kind of align with the truth within our hearts, the truth of what we know to be true between individuals. So no matter what they tell us on TV, oh, these two groups hate each other, or these two, if you actually get individuals into a space together, they can have a discussion, they can find common ground, and we don't have to be divided in the way we're told we're divided. And that, I think, is what this North Node in Cancer has a lot to do with. This sense of, aligning with others, from a heart center and from just a true base of reality, and forming a sense of family and nurturing and safety amongst each other without this top-down, this top-down method of defining it for us, defining what's safe and what's not safe, who's safe and who's not safe, etc., etc. We're going to decide that for ourselves, and that's really what is being brought into our awareness for the rest of this year, for the rest of 2019. And I think, in my opinion, when we get to this 2020 election, it doesn't matter which side you're on. I think people from all sides, voters from all sides, are again starting to come to this conclusion that what we're being presented, the options that we're being presented each election, are not of our choosing. Okay, and we got hints of this in 2016 when it was obvious that there was corruption in the DNC, and Bernie Sanders was the obvious popular candidate on the Democratic side, but Hillary got in there, and that was not done very authentically. Okay, and Assange, going back to Assange, had a lot of information on that. Okay, and you got to wonder why Hillary wasn't, or the DNC itself wasn't really prosecuted, etc., etc. So again, this is, I think 2020 is going to really amplify this, going to really take that to the next level, where people, us, on the ground level, are getting fed up completely with the system that only gives us their options. And what happens from that, I mean, not that things will happen immediately, but I think it's going to be the final straw election, in my opinion, because 2019 is building this energy up. People are getting awakened. People are getting fed up with being lied to. They're being realized they're being lied to, and they're recognizing that there's got to be a different way than just letting the old guard move us through, march us through from one election to the next, and choosing their candidates for us so that they can make sure that they keep that International Monetary Fund flowing, and keeping information hidden from us that could reveal corruption, etc., and perhaps creating false narratives, false collusions with other countries when you're against a certain candidate, or false accusations of hate crimes, just to create more division when the actual division doesn't exist from an individual to an individual. When we're talking across race or gender or sexual orientation or any kind of so-called disagreements. Okay, so that's my opinion. This is how I see this energy, that this year is setting it up, and we are, you can just see it, you can feel it in the air. There's a sense of people really recognizing this idea of elites in charge, or perceived to be in charge, so long as we put them there, so long as we allow it, so long as we give our permission, our consent. And voting itself is consent. So if we're actually voting for the choices we're given, we are giving our consent. So maybe 2020 is a year where a massive number of voters essentially refuse to choose between the candidates that are selected for us. I don't know. It's a possible expression or example of this energy happening with Pluto, Saturn, and Jupiter in Capricorn in 2020. Okay, and this sense of the final straw, that we're just really sick of it. We really don't want to have to put up with being strung along by the old guard, lied to, and have things misrepresented in general. Okay, so I think that pretty much wraps it up. I don't want to go too long, but I wanted to just to see if anyone else was feeling this, to see if anyone else was noticing this, because I've been really noticing it quite a bit. So feel free to comment, feel free to share this with anyone that you think could benefit or get some, a eureka moment from this kind of information, because maybe this will help clarify some things. I will be back probably in late June, early July, because July will be a very active astrological month. For the, this is already, all the themes I talked about today are still going to be happening in July, but July will have 2 eclipses. There's going to be one I believe it's a solar eclipse in Capricorn, followed by a lunar eclipse in Cancer, or it could be the other way around. I'm sorry if I screwed those up. And we'll have a Mercury retrograde going from about early Leo back into late Cancer. So the entire month of July essentially is going to have this eclipse, Mercury retrograde energy to it. So it will be a shifting period. But we have, you know, the whole month of May and June until then, with the themes that I talked about today still occurring. And if you have other examples of Jupiter squaring Neptune, Jupiter and Sag squaring Neptune in Pisces, or this idea of releasing the old guard, this Saturn, you know, retrograde right on the south node, feel free to share, because, you know, I brought up the Mueller case, the Smollett case, and what else did I talk? Oh, and Assange, just as some examples. But you may have some more, so feel free to share, because I mean, this is something that you know, some of us will see something, some of us will see other things. So the more we can kind of pile together, the more we can kind of show these energies, you know, are happening. Okay, so that will do it. My name is Christopher Taylor, Sovereign Harmony, and if you are interested, I will be available for another window, a small window, with a half off deal, 50% off. So I'll put some information down below. If you are interested, this is going to be from, I believe, Wednesday, May 29th, so right after Memorial Day, so the Wednesday after Memorial Day, Wednesday, May 29th, right through the following Tuesday, which is June 4th, I think. Yeah, June 4th. So Wednesday, May 29th to Tuesday, June 4th. If we can schedule in that window, in phone or in person, I will be in the northern San Diego County area in California, but I could do phone meetings, obviously, or Skype as well. So if that window can fit and you're interested in 50% off, let me know and we'll set something up. So until next time, take care and, you know, enjoy these energies, enjoy understanding what's happening a little bit better too. Okay? We'll see you next time.